had my friends over for a girls' night a couple of days ago, and it was fun and frolic, and we were all talking about our college days and how we had the good fortune of building this relationship over so many years. As the conversation flowed, it veered towards what our children were doing, how well our spouses had done, how much each of us had achieved, or unfortunately, in some cases, not achieved. One of the girls piped up and said, "Oh, I feel so poor." I was amused because between her and her husband, her net worth would have possibly been far more than all of us girls put together. What was she doing? She was comparing herself and feeling discontent. That reminded me of a story of a crow. A crow was flying around and feeling very envious of other birds, whether it was the peacocks, the swans, the eagles, and the many other birds that were a part of his domain. He constantly felt that because of their innate characteristics and beauty, they somehow were happier. On having conversations with those birds, he realized that each bird actually had a concern and a worry of their own. And thankfully, he concluded that possibly happiness or contentment is actually a result of how one views one's own life and where one is. And he stopped getting into the trap of comparing himself to those other creatures. Welcome. Welcome to today's episode of How to Be Content. Contentment varies from person to person and is very different. But why do we keep comparing ourselves to others and make ourselves feel so dissatisfied and discontent? First, we have to understand that the feeling of comparison, or rather the act of comparison, is an act of violence against oneself, and it is learned behavior. It is not a genetic trait or a disposition. Many times when children come and show us their report cards, instead of possibly celebrating their efforts, which some of us may fleetingly do, we more often than not ask them how their friends did, who was the topper, what was the topmost percentage, etc. And the child grows up with the feeling of always looking out for what others are doing rather than for what he or she is doing. Here are a few tips for you and I to not fall prey to comparison, because comparison leads to discontentment. First, focus on the acres of diamonds that lie under your feet. Yes, we have our own garden to till, but what happens when we look out? We waste energy. We are wasting energy in not doing what we need to do to make our soil under our feet more fertile and therefore more productive. 2. Understand that there is rarely, if ever, a level playing field. What do I mean? I take my own example. I was fortunate to be born to a family where my dad is a surgeon and he had his own clinic. We were 40 of us that graduated from the master's program in clinical psychology. I possibly am one of those few who was able to build my clinical practice. Now imagine if my other peers compare themselves to me. It is absolutely going to make them feel destroyed and devastated simply because they are comparing apples to oranges. I had the privilege of a free clinic, which none of them had, which means they would have had to pay rent, maybe borrow, and build their own practice, which was at that time possibly unfeasible. So realize, when you compare, you are comparing to something and somebody whose field is very, very different from yours. Doesn't that on its own showcase that comparison is an act of violence? 3. What is contentment for you may not be contentment for me. Had the crow realized that being free and being able to fly around at his will was a very big advantage which he enjoyed, and had he focused on that, possibly he would not be such a dissatisfied soul. It's time for us to define for ourselves what makes us content and to stick by it. Falling into the trap of comparison is not going to lead you to a content life, and it's a web from which it is very hard to escape. Think about this, and if you like what you hear, please do hit the like button, please do share my video, and of course continue to write to me at varkha@varkhachulani.com. Till next week, it's goodbye and thank you.